I think there's 4 phases an individual needs to go through. It takes work, it takes effort, it takes consistency, focused on one thing at a time, and then I built on it. And so you need to create custom rules, boundaries that keep you on track, that keep you focused to the life you're trying to design for yourself. That to me is like what you need to do in order to start living that life by design.
This individual is someone who I can attribute some insight into what that sentiment means. Someone who took a bet on himself, someone who motivates others and inspires others by virtue of his presence and effort in helping others shine. I'm so hyped to welcome to today's show, Mr. Bobby Hobert. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great, bro. How are we feeling today?
It's awesome to have you here, man. I love the mission that you're on. I think it's so commendable. The whole notion of a lifestyle entrepreneur is a concept that you're bringing to life, and I feel like that category of one kind of approach that you bring to the table, what inspired that approach?
I take a deep breath, man, because it's truly the product of the last 8 years. Even the design your life branding didn't even come to fruition until about a month ago, which just really, when I look back on the last decade of my life, that is how I would describe what my 20s were focused on. It was designing the life I wanted for myself, not living or a life by design of others. The single moment that completely set, I would say, the domino effect to getting me to this point was graduating college in 2016. I went to school outside the city of Boston at Bentley University, and I had a choice: get a job when I had realized during an internship my junior year that what I thought I wanted to do was absolutely not what I wanted to do, or go a new route, which was completely question mark. I don't know what I want to do. I don't know how I'm going to make a living. I have this idea to start a podcast. I don't know where it's going to take me. And I decided to go that route. I decided to just bet on myself, bet on creating this life for myself. And I'll never forget. So, college graduation's in May for most students. And I'll never forget September of that fall. This is a month after I launched my podcast. I'm driving Uber full time to pay the bills. And I get an email from my school saying, "Congrats to the class of 2016. 99% of you are currently enrolled in a full-time career." So they were tooting their horn saying, all of our undergrads that graduated 5-6 months ago, they now have full-time gigs. That's one thing the school prided themselves on, was job placement. And I was like, I'm actually finally part of the 1%. I'm not that guy. I'm not in working the full-time job. I'm the 1% that doesn't have a job, chose not to get a job. So I'd say that was the singular moment that really set me on this path, and so many chapters in between. It's been a ride, man. I'll leave it there because I feel like we can go so many different ways, but that was the moment. It was just it was deciding that I wasn't going to live the life that others were telling me how to live my life. I was going to choose to be the designer of it. And I didn't even know what design your life looked like then, but I just knew that I wanted to create my own path and kind of see where it would take me.
If you're operating out of alignment, it's like this. I hear a lot about frequency lately, and it resonates, no pun intended, because you just know something's off. You're not on the path or the vibe that you want to be on, and there's a consequence to that. It's the foods that you're eating, it's the sleep that you're getting or not getting, it's the quality of the relationships in your life that suffer. You're out of alignment. And I feel like in viewing your content, it's so raw and honest and sincere, right? There's the portrayal of the stories that you've shared and the bet that you've taken on yourself. I alluded to that at the top. You recently left your job and started your own, went full time in.
I burnt the boats, my man. It's either now or never. This is 8 years in the making. Let's just do this thing.
So how does that feel now that you're fully in it? Was it worth it?
That's such a pivotal moment in a lot of people's careers and lives. If you're trying to pursue the entrepreneur route, it was the moment they quit the job, right? And I've heard so many different variations of the entrepreneur who was just seeing so much success with their side hustle. They left their career and everything was kind of already laid out in front of them. I've heard the opposite story where someone quits their job, has no plan, and just kind of like forces themselves to figure it out. I'd say I was kind of like in the middle of it where I had essentially like these levers that I could pull to financially keep myself afloat, such as like different offers and ways that I had been monetizing my career. But by no means was it guaranteed, or did I have like, I had confidence in myself, but like there was no like dollar signs coming in the door, like, all right, you're good for the next 6 months to a year. It was, I didn't do the math, but I'd say I probably had 5 or 6 months of runway, like cash on hand to keep me afloat. It just was a pivotal moment where things were adding up, where it was kind of like, if I don't do this now, I may never end up doing it. And also, I was getting so pulled into my full time career and growth within the company and responsibilities that I was just like starting to resent the work. For the 2 to 3 years leading up to that moment, I was actually in a great spot. I loved my role. I kind of honestly just like systemized it. And, I didn't need to work 40 hours to manage it. So I was kind of dancing both my entrepreneurship build out and then the company. But it got to a point where I was resenting the work, and I was just miserable, and not miserable, and like I let that affect my external world, but I just constantly was just feeling like pressure, and I was starting to lose time and energy towards building my business. So I burned the boats. I forced myself to figure it out, and we're about a little over a month at the recording of this podcast of when I left, and it was without a doubt the best decision. I have felt so much peace and freedom on a day-to-day basis, and I have been able to drop into a level of focus that I never knew was possible because I've eliminated all of the distraction. My calendar is completely clear for just the things that I prioritize. I have to remind myself every day, Jonathan, that I'm living the dream that I've always had for myself. And like, there's nothing else more that I need other than this present moment and what I have in my life. Like, the new car, the new house, flying first class, whatever, like that's great. That's a lot of endorphins, and it's sexy, it's beautiful, it's exciting. But truthfully, where I'm at present day, I don't need anything else. I'm right where I need to be.
It's important to level set, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think that when I think about your story, or when I follow your content, and I'm like introduced to this ability to lead your life by design, right? And it's something that I embody on a daily basis. And another mutual connection, I believe Eric Hinman talks about this concept of chasing perfect days, dreaming about what your perfect day is, and then writing out how many of those things you can do on a daily basis. Right. So like once you realize what your perfect day looks like, you're like, hey, I can actually get the coffee. I can be with my dog. I can get in that workout. I can have that meal. Like you can curate those things into your day to day. And I feel like most people don't have that confidence to go build out their life by design. So what does that mean in your view? What does it mean to lead your life by design?
A lot of people struggle with this, man. A lot of people are living the life that they think they're told to live. Like I remember when I was going back to kind of the earlier part of this conversation, when I was graduating college, I told kids that I was graduating with, I'm not getting a job. I had kids, we're 21, 22 at the time, feels like kids. I'm 30 now. But like I had kids around me that were telling me straight up like, oh yeah, I have to work at this job because my parents are forcing me. They made me apply. I got the job and now I have to work there. And I was just like, really? You're doing this job because your parents told you? Like, I'm coming from the place I had to pay. It's probably because their parents paid for their school, right? And that was probably the deal. Like, hey, we're going to pay for your college. So now you got to work. That wasn't the situation with my parents. Like I was funding I was getting the whole bill of college. So that's just like an example where like, there's just a lot of people in this world that just aren't living a life in alignment for a magnitude of different reasons. But I think the key that if you're listening present day and you're like, I want to change my life, I want to live by design, what do I do, Bobby? I think there's 4 phases an individual needs to go through. The first phase, they need to take a audit of themselves about their personal, professional life. They need to look at what is or isn't working. and ask themselves what needs to change. The second phase is they need to go into what I would call mapping out the dream life. They need to ask themselves, similar to the perfect day, what does the dream life look like? How am I spending my time each day, week, and month? What are my priorities? Like, if I close my eyes and visualize that, what does that look and feel like, right? Now that you have an understanding of where you're trying to go, phase 3 is you build out your custom calendar. You create a calendar that is aligned with your goals, your priorities, your interests, and you map out those things that are so important to you. You put them on your calendar. Becomes non-negotiable, becomes so much easier to stay disciplined. Also gives you peace every day because you're waking up and you know what to do and when. It's not, I wake up and I'm like, damn, what time do I want to go to the gym? Like, do I want to do the morning, middle afternoon? Do I want to go tonight? No, it's already, I'm already systemized. I'm like, my day's already planned so that when I wake up, I know exactly what I'm doing throughout the day, which gives me peace. And then the last phase, I would say, which is build out a personal playbook. You got to create rules to live by custom to you. And that's going to change, right? Like when I say rules, I'm also referring to boundaries. And so you need to create custom rules, boundaries that keep you on track, that keep you focused to the life you're trying to design for yourself. That could be, maybe creating distance from people that are just pulling you off track, or, you tell yourself you want to eliminate toxic dopamine hits. Well, maybe you need to stop going out on the weekends to the club, whatever. So I think if an individual can go through those 4 phases, you're going to start living a life by design. It takes work, it takes effort, it takes consistency. That to me is like what you need to do in order to start living that life by design.
You talked about a few things over there. You talked about boundaries, which for me was one of those eye-opening moments that, toxic behaviors, I feel like everyone knows what they are at this point. For the most part, you can kind of identify, and again, that frequency that you realize you're not living in harmony with yourself. You're not living in alignment with those behaviors. Like, it doesn't feel good to go out, drink, and wake up with a hangover and try to sweat it out and, just need quote unquote recovery, or just certain, and then, this cycle of the unhealthy foods, metabolism killers, etc. Like, we all kind of know that narrative at this point. And if you're still struggling with that, I mean, I feel like if you're looking for the next step beyond, okay, now my mind and body are in a good place where I know that there's more, but what does that look like? I feel like boundaries are a key pillar in what that next step is. And you kind of outlined it in phases, which I think is important because it's like chapters, right? Just to draw another metaphor, or seasons of life where you're evolving in conversation to conversation, or job to job, or, your 20s, your 30s, etc. Learning to set boundaries is one of those tactics that I feel like gets extremely underlooked and undervalued. How have you gone about setting boundaries, and what can people actionably do and instill in their lives today to start to realize, hey, this is maybe a place where I need to set a boundary that I haven't yet?
So it's interesting, the 4 phases that I just listed out to you, right? Audit yourself, map out the dream life, create the custom calendar, build the personal playbook, the boundary book. You can do those first 3 steps, which can be some intensive, deep work. But you get to that 4th step and you don't do it, you don't create the boundaries, all of that work goes out the door. So the boundaries are creating the personal boundaries that work for you. It's non-negotiable. It has to be done, because if you don't, you are going to get pulled off track in every which direction the world wants to pull you. It has taken consistent effort, it has repetition, consistency, but I am unapologetic about boundaries that I have in my life. It's just because what these boundaries are for is to always prioritize my own peace, freedom, well-being. And if I don't prioritize these boundaries, those are going to get neglected, which then builds hate, resent. It will just put me in a place of just not feeling the presence and gratitude that I feel on a daily basis. So for example, more recently when I was leaving my full-time job, I got very real with myself about, I'm very good with boundaries, but like, what are some new boundaries that I want to introduce, or how do I want to welcome this new season of my life? So 6 boundaries I came up with were, stop working by 6 p.m. every day, which is forcing healthy internal pressure to be productive during my day, but also not forcing me to burn out. Another one was carving out time for social commitments at least twice a week, but hopefully no more than that. That's because I just moved to Austin. I want to get to know people more, but I also don't want to spend my week running around trying to meet people, because my priority right now, or three priorities in my life right now, is my business, my relationship, and my well-being. And they're all kind of level, right? So I think I'll give you one. The third of the six was taking one full day off on the weekend. So one of the 2 days I just fully commit to just not working. And that gives me an opportunity to recharge and reset myself. So of those three examples, those are all created for the reason of my priorities, for those three priorities that I have of mine. If I don't have these in place, once again, on my calendar is going to be booked with so many different things. Like a big priority within my business bucket right now is building out the Design Your Life program, which I'm excited about. I think this is going to be the thing that really helps a lot of people at scale. There is so much time, effort, and energy that's getting put into this that I think when it launches, which will from start to finish probably have taken me 90 days, I think that realistically would take most people maybe half a year to make, because they work on it for 20 minutes, then they check their Instagram, then they're running to a lunch downtown. Now it's 30 minutes there. They're there for an hour, 30 minutes back. Like, people are just constantly just doing everything except the thing they need to do. So I think they're extremely important. I think anyone that you look at that's successful or you're inspired by at a high level, I think they're just masters of creating boundaries for themselves, their time, their energy. And I'm just unapologetic about it. It's what I need. They're set in place for my own personal interests. And because of that, I just feel so much peace on a day-to-day basis, because everything is in alignment and everything is on my calendar is helping me get to where I want to be.
Hi everyone, welcome to Inside the Inspired. My name is Jonathan Cohen, and I have a quick favor to ask you. If you're getting any value out of this content, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. You help us reach more people, and you can also stay up to date with all the latest content coming your way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll catch you in the episode.
I love how you started it by talking about you could do all the work, and then if you don't set the boundary, then all that previous work was for nothing. And then you did a great job of outlining the different areas of your life where you've set boundaries with prime examples of how it's actually benefited you in your growth and your progress and your productivity. I don't know why I'm referring to frequency so much. I think it's because like in the last 24, 48 hours, I've had this crazy moment where I'm thinking about something and then like that person texts me, or just like one or two of those experiences where I'm like, oh my God, like I've had that happen in like 3 days, like what's going on? And then when you have enough of these conversations, you can tell. I mean, the one thing I left out, one of the things, not the one thing that I left out about you, not to digress, is that you're also a podcaster. You've had, forgive me if I'm misspeaking, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 different podcasts.
2, yeah.
So this is the second rendition, right? The Bearded Man podcast.
Yeah.
And it's evolved. You got solo episodes, you got interviews, high performers, entrepreneurs, creators, and then your own insights that you offer, from how to design a perfect to-do list to how to say no. There's all these different elements that you incorporate into your content that I know are very value driven, specifically like curating that perfect to-do list. I thought it was a great blog and great pod episode. I think also the different renditions of how you go. And this is like the other element that's cool about you as a creator. Like, you overlap the content piece, or the substance of the content, but then you put it into different formats for different audiences. And I think that even if that's a well-known framework that people understand, the execution of it is something different. And I think that's where you deserve the credit, the execution of it, because you're actually A, doing it, and then B, doing it well, from the quality of the audio to the substance of the writing to the visual aspect of it, the portrayal. So let's talk about being a creator for a second. Now that we've kind of adjusted to the now that we've adjusted and understand who we're talking about in terms of a lifestyle entrepreneur, and we've defined that and you've outlined some phases. And if you want more of Bobby's content, I highly advise that you go to his website, to his page, and look at his one-on-one coaching and different offerings, because the dude is the real deal. As you could tell, otherwise he wouldn't have bet on himself. From a creator perspective, what's the plan there? What is that through line? How did you build your audience, and how does that play into what you're doing now?
Yeah, first off, I just appreciate the support. It's funny even hearing you reflect that back to me as an outsider, because any creator listening that, aspires to be like someone else, or they don't realize that that creator goes through the same hurdles, mental blocks as they currently do. The only difference might be is that creator has been more consistent and has been able to just consistently do the thing even on the days they don't want to do it. So I really appreciate the recognition, because it's just like, I'm like, little does Jonathan know that every day I'm just pushing through that mental barrier of just overthinking and, all that. So I appreciate that. I was just talking to somebody a couple weeks ago about this, and he has been creating content for 18 months. I'm, running with him. I'm like, I've been creating content for 8 years. And the key has been truly a slow build. Like, let's speak at a high level present day. I run a podcast. I put out social media content. I have a newsletter. I have a coaching program. I have digital course offerings, yada, yada, yada. But the only way that was even possible was because I've consistently focused on one thing at a time, and then I built on it. You have to give yourself permission to test and try. And even present day, like I'm in, most people don't see behind the scenes, but like I'm in a very testing phase right now. The content that worked for me religiously 12, 16 months ago doesn't work like it used to. So now I'm just testing and seeing, what other ways can I create content that captures people's attention, that gives them value. So it really has just been a consistent game of testing and trying, seeing what do I enjoy creating, and then seeing what actually drives results.
I think that the iteration aspect is so important, because you're being very transparent about what did work and what doesn't work, and also the hockey stick kind of approach, right? Like showing up even on the days you don't want to. I talk about this a lot. I know you've run a few marathons in a very short period of time as well. And I've run a few. I've done a 50 miler. I've done things like 1,018 pull-ups in 4 hours to raise money for an organization called the Friendship Circle. I did the same thing with push-ups in an hour. Again, all these different things to raise money. And when you show, and I talk about it a lot now, because now when I run, I'm training more for speed. And it's a different beast. Like, like when you're training and you're running and you're doing intervals, it's a much different beast. Just showing up and doing slow heart rate running for hours at a time. It's just a completely different animal. It's a different version of you that's required. And in 30 degrees, when it's snowing, when it's not snowing, when it's raining, like, putting on the gloves, putting on the tights, like all these different things, running in the hills, trying to avoid the hills, running in Central Park, like all these different things. It just requires another beast to go and do these things. Like endurance is one thing, because it's like, I will not quit. But with speed, it's like, how can I go faster and still not quit? And I'm not necessarily accustomed to that. It definitely hits different. And that element of consistency that you're talking about, how you have to show up on those days that you don't want to. I've been really playing with this idea of why I train so hard and do all this work. It's deep work, right? And reflective work. And what I come down to is that it's all about self-trust. And I'm teaching myself to trust myself, teaching myself to believe in myself, teaching myself to do the things that I don't want to do. So on the days that something bad happens, I'm still going to show up and do the things that I don't want to do. I'll be better for it. And those days will still be tough, but I'll be able to make it through them because I made it through all my bad days. And so when I hear you talk about like your creator journey, it reminds me of that sentiment, because now you're very open to the iteration aspect, right? You're like, now I'm testing different things. So as a creator, what are some of the different formats that you're testing? What's working for you? What's not working for you?
It's a great question. Honestly, I'm still very much trying to figure out what is working. And I think really the main focus for me is just short form content, because I've found that the only way to grow the long form, like my podcast, is getting short form content videos to pop, which then drives people interested to want to hear more of that episode. That's how I've seen the most downloads in my show, is from social medias, that posts that have popped. So right now I'm toying with like a lot of different variations, whether it's filming myself on the side and like mocking I'm on a podcast and like answering questions, or like speaking on topics that I want to create a piece of content on. I'll shoot it directly from the side and make it look like I'm actually recording a podcast. Or I've tested just doing text on screen, making it very super fast. So like, attention spans are out the door, and trying to get as much value within 10 seconds or less. I've tested just literally just doing, face talking videos. If anyone hears this and goes look at my Instagram over the last, couple of weeks, you see different variations. But it's so interesting because, the last video I had pop probably did like 2 million on Instagram, and that was 30 or 45 days ago. And then I use that same format again, and it doesn't work. But it happens. It's just, that's the thing for most creators, is it doesn't happen on a daily basis. It's just the 1 in 50 post that pops. And then that one pops. So these people go and look at the other 49 and are like, wow, that's good value. That's good value. And then they give them the follow. So you can't my whole philosophy has always been process is greater than result. So I'm not allowing the results of my content to be the thing of, should I keep doing this or should I not? And at a high level of like, do I want to be a creator or not? I'll use it as an indicator of like, this format works or it doesn't, but it doesn't stop me from creating content. So that's kind of been my whole philosophy behind it, is really finding joy in the day-to-day process, controlling what is within my control, and letting go of everything that's outside of it.
And I think one more creator question would be in terms of trends and tracking trends, identifying trends. I love this question, especially of high profile creators. What has been your process beyond iteration and testing?
I don't really lean into the trends. Like that was big on TikTok. I'd say I feel like I don't see it, or you get some trends that do pop off. I think I was having fun with like recently around New Year's, there was like an a TikTok trend where it was like show one video of every month of your year. And like, I was like, oh, this is fun. Let me just try this. But like, I stay away from the trends. My approach, if I was to add trends in my mix of content, I'd say one of every 15 posts would be a trend. Because if you're just hopping on the trend wave and just that's all you do is lean into trends, like somebody lands on your page, you're like, wow, Bobby just creates content around the trends, which is fine. But you can, like a strategic thing that I did was 4 months ago, there was a trend once again on TikTok where I saw this sound bite that people were using as like a 6-second sound bite. And I was like, oh, I have an idea to create something around this trend, but showcasing like the moment from me deciding I wanted to stop drinking alcohol to where I'm at now. So it was like the first 3 seconds was like me every Sunday hungover, and it was like me laying on my couch sleeping. And then it was like a cut to like my life without alcohol. And it was like, well-being, running, cold plunges. And it was like, it was emotional, right? And it popped. It did like, 2 million views on TikTok. And it was like, great. I created something that was authentic to me. That's where I think a lot of people go wrong, is they'll create content on the trend that's not aligned with them. Like my rule of thumb has always been, if this piece goes viral, do I want to be known as the guy that created a piece of content on X? So like, I'm not going to go create content like ding dong ditching my neighbors and hoping it gets 10 million views. Like, okay, if it gets 10 million views, I'm known as the guy that does ding dong ditches. Like, is that what I want? No, it's not. So I think you can strategically lean into trends, but I think it shouldn't be like a pillar of your content. It's a good strategy to get exposure, but for me, it hasn't been my growth does not come from trends. Some videos, but I'd say less than 10%.
We were talking about the running earlier. 3 marathons in 90 days, pardon me.
Sorry if there was a messaging where I misspoke on it. 3 marathons in 6 months.
How'd you go about training? How'd you go about preparing? How'd you go about keeping your mind right for that kind of task? We did 1 marathon last year, man. Like it's
Well, it's insane. You mentioned like frequency, and that was something my girl and I have been talking about a lot. And even another buddy of mine, we were talking about that on Tuesday, where it's like when you're living in alignment, like things like the serendipity of life just starts to really flow for your favor, because you're just creating a reality that's so much more in alignment with you that things kind of just fall into place or naturally happen. And you're like, whoa, this is weird. For me, I had signed up for the LA Marathon, which was supposed to be March of 2022. We were still dealing with pandemic stuff in LA, so they pushed it to November. So about 2 months before the marathon came, this creator, Nick Bear, who I'm a huge fan of as a runner, he posted out. You're familiar with him. His company, Bear Performance Nutrition, posted out they're going to host their first marathon, and it was going to be January of 2023. No, excuse me, it was January of 2022. Sorry, LA Marathon was November of 2021, and I hear about it, and I'm like, this would be epic, because I would not have been a marathon runner if it wasn't for Nick Bear. So I did the math, and I was like, it was at the end of January, and the marathon for LA was November 7th. I was like, I'll have 90 days almost in between this marathon and that one. Like, I can rest, retrain, and do it. So I signed up without even completing my first marathon. I signed up for 2. And then right when I finished LA, a few months in between finishing LA before Austin, I started to get the itch to want to do the Boston Marathon. I'm from Massachusetts. It's always been like on my bucket list. And one thing led to another. My buddy, Matt, hit me up. I was like, yo, I'm running Boston this year. You should do it. And I'm like, dude, I would love to. I don't have a qualifying time. And he's like, you should find a charity. So in between completing my first, haven't done the second, I then signed up. I found a way to get onto the Dana-Farber team where I had to raise $7,500 before the marathon. And so now I signed up for 2 more marathons, and I had only completed 1. So then January 27th was BPN. And then I ran Boston April 7th, I want to say. My body was already in marathon training condition. So it was like, once I finished the first one, I just had to maintain that condition for the next 2.5 months. Did that, and then I redid it all over again. But I will say, the 2 weeks leading up to Boston, I was like, I'm done. After this marathon, don't need running shoes, because I'm not running again. And I honestly, after Boston, I don't think I put on my running shoes until maybe June of that year.
Wow.
July. I was over it. I was just like, this is mentally, it's just like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. So moved on and then got back into it.
Yeah, that happened to me. First off, amazing. That happened to me after the pull-ups. I was like, I'm spent. My body hasn't really been the same since. It's been, I can still do hundreds. I just don't, it's just one of those, like, I got nothing to prove. And I think that goes back to this whole, and I'd love your take on it, just building self-trust. Like, and I think discipline and motivation also, and mindset, like when it comes to high performance, there's this element of when you hear something like 3 marathons in 6 months or 1,000 pull-ups or any other crazy feat, just for the purposes of this conversation, it can be tough for people to relate. It doesn't necessarily resonate. It's like, good for you. How does that help me? How do you think it helps someone else?
I think you're right. I think it doesn't. If you're starting, like, to get someone to go from 0 to 1, and I tell them I did 3 marathons in 6 months, they're like, forget this, right? But one thing I try to challenge people in their mindset is remembering it's all relative to where you're at now. So you need to meet yourself where you're currently standing. So, if I went into like the depths of Instagram stories from probably like June of 2020, I think people would be surprised to realize I was struggling to run a mile or run 2 miles, but I just consistently stayed at it and built the base and built my way up to, I didn't run anywhere north of 10 miles until 2022. So I spent almost a year and a half less than that, just putting up 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles, a 6 miler every 2 weeks. Like it just takes time, right? So, you know, I think in parallel, like where I'm at right now, as I mentioned, I'm building up this course. It's so easy for me to just compare, like see what other creators are doing, or like, you know, I see another creator and they have like a 6-step business outline where it's like you get you're on their free PDF, and then they have their $200 offer, then they're $600, then they're $2,000, $10,000, then they're 101. I'm just like, whoa, that's like a few years in the making, and it can be super overwhelming. But then I have to remind myself, meet yourself where you're at, Bobby. All you need to focus on is what you're trying to build and what you're trying to do. So to bring it back to that original question is like, if anything, use I ran a 100-miler, or I made, you know, $1 million in 24 hours, like all those things that you see in the media. It's easy to fall for the comparison trap, but what you should do is see those as examples of what is possible. Wow, that guy made $1 million in 24 hours. If he does it, that means I could do it. Oh, that guy ran 100 miles. If he's done it, I could do it, if you're willing to put in the time and effort into it. So for me, I've really changed out the lens where I would more times than not be jealous, fall for comparison, and instead see those as signals, as green light, keep going, that's what's possible. Green light, keep going, that's what's possible. So I use other people's wins to my own advantage. It's like fuel to the fire within me. It's not my win, it's not my thing, but I'm like, ooh, they did it. I could do that if I want to do it.
The mindset game is real with you, man. You're the real deal. And it's awesome to sit down. I want to respect your time. This has been so much fun. There's a question that I pose to all my guests that I'm not going to pose to you. If the future version of yourself from 10 years from now, assuming he's in that ideal spot, were to fly in and offer you some advice in order to get there, what do you think he would say to you?
The word that I went into this year was trust. And I feel like that is so much what I would tell myself then, is just trust the process. You know, it can be, life can be full of pain. It can be full of overwhelm. It can be full of questioning your own decision-making. It can be full of just a lot of emotions that you just don't want to feel and just make you not happy with the life you're living. But if you truly trust, I think everything works itself out, just the way I did when I got into that Uber and I told myself, I'm going to drive this car until I find a way to make money doing my podcast. I trusted it. It took me 3 years until I left driving Uber, but I moved on. And then I worked at Liquid IV for 4 years, and I trusted through that process I would find the next step. And here we are. And now I'm full-time on myself, and I'm trusting that abundance and opportunities are going to come knocking on my door. So I think that advice would be to trust the process, which also in turn would allow me to carve out time to enjoy my life and not feel like I need to get to X spot in my life or career for me to finally start living. And that in a bow tie just summarizes everything of what I'm preaching today, which is like create work-life harmony, enjoy the ride, have massive success with your business, but also enjoy yourself along the way. So trust the process.
Bobby, thank you so much. Please let the audience know where they can keep up with your journey.
Donovan, it's been a pleasure. I first would ask anyone that listens to the show, if you really enjoyed this episode, rate it, review it. I know there's a lot of work behind the scenes for Jonathan to produce these shows. He even called out his editor on this episode, which just shows me he's got someone to help support him in building this, which takes time, man. So if you are listening and you enjoyed this episode or enjoy the show, like it, subscribe to it. It goes a long way. If you want to connect with me, I think the best spot is just bobbyhobert.com, BOBBYHOBERT. From there, you can find my newsletter, digital courses, one-on-one coaching program. All my socials are linked up there, but that's the best way. Or it's the Bearded Man Podcast on all platforms.
Thank you so much, man.
Appreciate you, brother.